Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana never imagined that an ordinary night in Moscow, Idaho, would be their last. Hours after laughter and routine moments filled their college home, police bodycam footage would capture the haunting aftermath of a crime so brutal it stunned the nation and exposed the terrifying truth that danger can hide in plain sight. Moscow, Idaho was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors waved at each other from across the street, and where the most exciting news often came from the local university's football games. It was a quiet town where life moved slowly and people felt safe. That sense of peace was shattered on a cold November morning, when a 911 call pulled police officers to a rental home just a few blocks from campus. The house had always been lively, a place where students laughed, studied, and threw parties. But what officers found inside told a story no one was prepared to hear. The crime scene they walked into would mark the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in the town's history. The details were overwhelming from the start. Police cars lined the narrow street, their flashing lights casting eerie patterns on the snow-covered ground. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering to one another, unsure of what had happened, but sensing it was something far worse than a routine disturbance. Officers moved quickly, securing the area with yellow tape, trying to keep curious onlookers at a distance. But nothing could keep out the dread that began to spread through the neighborhood as word traveled fast. Inside the home, the reality was devastating. 4 young students, full of promise and plans for the future, were found dead under brutal circumstances. Their lives had been cut short in a way that shocked even seasoned detectives. The cheerful posters on the walls, the books scattered on desks, and the half-finished cups of coffee in the kitchen clashed sharply with the violence that had taken place. It was as if 2 worlds had collided: the ordinary life of students and a night of unthinkable horror. The town that had once seemed so safe suddenly felt exposed. Parents called their children frantically, making sure they were safe, while students locked their doors for the first time in years. Local media scrambled to cover the breaking story, but even their words struggled to capture the scale of the tragedy. The community was left reeling, and rumors began to swirl almost instantly. Who could have done something so terrible? Was the killer still nearby? And why had these particular victims been targeted? As night fell on Moscow, a heavy silence settled over the town. The house at the center of it all stood dark, sealed off by police tape, a grim reminder of the violence that had unfolded within its walls. What had once been a symbol of youth and energy was now the heart of a mystery that would grip the nation. The first real glimpse into the tragedy came when the bodycam footage from responding officers was eventually released. What had once been whispered about in fragments of news stories and online speculation was suddenly laid bare in a way that shocked everyone who watched. The video began with the shaky view of flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the quiet houses of the street. The sound of the officers' footsteps crunching against the frosted ground added to the tension, each step leading closer to the front door of the house that had become a scene of horror. The stillness of the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the chaos waiting inside, and viewers could feel the unease through the lens. The footage captured the moment officers entered the rental home, and from that point on, the atmosphere shifted. Furniture was overturned, items were scattered as if someone had been desperately trying to defend themselves, and broken glass glittered under the camera light. The silence inside was almost unbearable, interrupted only by the sound of radios crackling faintly in the background. The walls bore faint marks that told a story of violence without words, and the trail of blood spoke louder than any explanation. For many who saw the recording, it was not the brutality that haunted them most, but the eerie absence of life in a house that had once been so full of it. The release of the footage created a storm of emotions across the community and far beyond. Some argued that such raw evidence should never have been made public, while others insisted it was the transparency the case demanded. The chilling images were dissected frame by internet sleuths, each detail magnified into a possible clue. Observers noticed the angle of the footprints leading to the back door, the smudge of fingerprints on a window, and even the way an untouched phone kept buzzing in the corner of the room. Every frozen detail seemed to whisper a clue, yet none gave a full answer. For the residents of Moscow, watching the footage felt like reliving the nightmare all over again. The familiar rooms, the household objects, the little glimpses of everyday student life turned upside down by violence. It was impossible not to feel the weight of what had happened. The bodycam did more than document a crime scene. It forced everyone who watched to step inside the reality of that night. It stripped away rumors and speculation, replacing them with a stark, unforgettable picture of the truth that had been hidden behind yellow tape. Detectives faced the daunting task of piecing together what had happened inside the house, and the bodycam footage became the starting point of their investigation. From the first sweep of the scene, they noticed details that hinted at both panic and planning. A kitchen drawer stood wide open, its knives missing, suggesting the weapon may have come from inside the home. Muddy footprints trailed faintly across the floor, leading from the back door toward the woods beyond the property line. In one of the rooms, a shattered lamp lay across the floor, pointing to a sudden struggle that had ended almost as quickly as it began. Each item felt like a puzzle piece, and the challenge was figuring out how they all fit together. The most troubling clue was a cell phone lying face down, buzzing repeatedly with unanswered calls. When investigators retrieved it, they discovered desperate messages from friends who had tried to reach the victim during the night. The timestamps hinted that the killings had occurred in a narrow window of time, perhaps less than an hour. Detectives traced the digital trail further, pulling security footage from businesses near the area. At a gas station less than a mile away, surveillance cameras captured a white sedan passing by multiple times in the early morning hours, circling the neighborhood as though its driver was studying the streets. When this footage was leaked to the public, it ignited a firestorm of speculation. Online forums lit up with theories, ranging from the idea of a random drifter passing through town to suspicions that someone close to the victims had carefully orchestrated the crime. Every detail was scrutinized: the timing of the phone calls, the angle of the footprints, even the positioning of the vehicles parked outside the house that night. Amateur investigators debated late into the night, and the case grew into a national obsession. Despite the flood of theories, real progress came slowly. Detectives sifted through mountains of tips, many of them false leads or dead ends. Some claimed to have seen the white sedan in nearby towns. Others believed they recognized the shadow of a figure caught in the background of the footage. The uncertainty only deepened the fear gripping Moscow. Students avoided walking alone at night, families double-checked their locks, and the once bustling community felt suspended in dread. The town waited anxiously, clinging to the hope that somewhere within the growing pile of evidence, the truth was hiding, ready to emerge. Weeks passed without an arrest, and the sense of unease grew heavier with every day. Then, in a surprising turn, investigators announced they had located the white sedan seen circling the neighborhood on the night of the murders. The car was registered to a graduate student living just 2 towns away, a man who blended seamlessly into the community. He attended classes, visited coffee shops, and walked the same streets as everyone else, all while harboring a secret that would soon come to light. The discovery marked a turning point in the case, transforming vague speculation into a chilling focus on a single suspect. The man's background drew immediate attention. He had been studying criminology, with a particular interest in the psychology of killers and the methods used to solve violent crimes. To classmates, he seemed quiet, perhaps socially distant, but never dangerous. Professors remembered his pointed questions during lectures about evidence collection and criminal patterns, though at the time, those questions had seemed no more than academic curiosity. With hindsight, they appeared far darker. Digital evidence placed him near the victim's house on several occasions in the weeks leading up to the murders. His phone records revealed late-night drives through the neighborhood, as if he had been studying the area and the people who lived there. Detectives also learned that his online searches included troubling phrases about planning crimes, evading detection, and understanding police investigations. The once ordinary graduate student now looked less like a scholar and more like someone rehearsing for the night of the killings. When police moved in to arrest him, the community's shock was immediate. The suspect had not been a stranger passing through town or a shadowy figure lurking far away. He had been living quietly among them the entire time. Parents who once felt relieved that their children were near campus now felt betrayed by the thought that danger had existed so close to home. Neighbors who had seen the man in grocery stores or at gas stations replayed those encounters with unease, realizing they had brushed shoulders with someone capable of calculated violence. The arrest gave Moscow its first breath of relief, but it also raised more questions. Why had he chosen those victims? What had driven him to turn his fascination with crime into a horrifying reality? As investigators continued to dig into his life, they uncovered a chilling picture of a man who believed he could outsmart the very system he studied. The arrest was only the beginning. Investigators armed with a search warrant entered the suspect's apartment, hoping to uncover answers to the many questions that still lingered. What they found painted a disturbing portrait of careful planning. Hidden in drawers and stacked on shelves were notebooks filled with meticulous entries. Each page contained detailed observations about human behavior, the psychology of fear, and most unsettling of all, the daily routines of the victims. Dates and times matched when neighbors had last seen them, when lights in their house turned on or off, and when they usually left for class. It was clear that this crime had not been spontaneous, it had been studied and rehearsed like an experiment. Alongside the journals, police discovered a collection of items that tied the suspect directly to the crime scene. A pair of shoes matched the tread marks photographed in the snow outside the victim's home. A knife sheath bearing traces of DNA mirrored the missing weapon from the kitchen drawer. Even strands of fibers collected from his car were consistent with the clothing the victims had been wearing. What had once seemed like scattered pieces of evidence now fit neatly into place, each detail reinforcing the connection between the suspect and the night of terror. Ironically, it was the very bodycam footage that ultimately sealed his fate. In the background of the video, investigators notice faint impressions left on the floor, impressions too subtle for the naked eye, but preserved forever by the camera's lens. When compared to the suspect's shoes, the match was undeniable. He had believed he could commit the perfect crime, but he had overlooked the small, invisible ways technology and persistence could betray him. The revelations left the community stunned. The killer had walked among them as a student of crime, attempting to prove a twisted theory that he could carry out violence without consequence. Yet the very details he thought would make him invisible instead exposed him. The people of Moscow, though still grieving, found a measure of comfort knowing the mystery had been solved and justice was moving forward. The quiet town would never be the same, forever marked by the memory of the victims and the chilling case that had shaken its core. The story closed not with the myth of a perfect crime, but with the truth that even the smallest overlooked clue can shatter the illusion of safety a predator tries to create.